All right. Welcome into another edition of Steak, Bourbon, and Sports. This is the show where we eat steak, drink bourbon, to talk about sports. Sometimes a little from column A, a little from column B, none of column C, but we mix it up. We have a good time. On today's show, you'll notice the man with the poofy hair, who looks kind of like Cosmo Kramer right now, is my buddy Will Chambers, who you can catch on 105.3 The Fan, locally in Dallas. And you have podcasts. What? Give a shout out to your podcasts and whatnot.
I'm actually on a podcast break.
with the exception of this podcast.
I had to go to podcast rehab, and because over the course of the last 3 years, I feel like I've had 8,000 podcasts, and I want to be a part of all of them and do them, and I love them because I like talking. And I like talking about so many different subjects that I literally had to be put into an institution. They told me, we need you to just pump the brakes here. So I've taken a break from the podcast. I'm exclusively with 105.3 The Fan and with whatever Ari Temkin asked me to do. and only because this is my Bears brother in Texas.
Yes.
And that is it.
Jeremy, I forgot to tell you, Will is also a long-suffering Bears fan.
Yeah. Oh, by the way,
did you forget to tell me, or did you strategically not tell me?
Yes.
This is not done on purpose. This is just what we like to call on brand, Ari. So the shirt that I happen to be wearing tonight.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
That's amazing.
Also, here's this, because I'm wearing my...
UK
Kentucky
basketball's
shorts.
fallen some hard times.
Yeah. That's just. I mean, this is how I dress, but I mean, it's what we like to call on brand. Which we know that you and I had a head-to-head going up this past week, and then things have gone a lot better for the Cats too. But
suddenly, the Kansas win over Kentucky doesn't look as good after they lose to Georgia Tech over the weekend.
Yeah, and okay, so this is what everybody thinks, Ari. Everybody's like, are you okay? There's people on the Autoflex Leasing fan text. They're texting me rock chalk and little bitch. You okay? I'm like, I'm fine. We're going to be fine. This is the same thing every year. I did not anticipate looking like a hot dumpster fire that was seeping out of the dumpster, the bad smelling juice that comes out of it with it also being on fire that we look like against Georgia Tech. I did not anticipate that. So
Kansas nearly lost to North Dakota State at home and had to somehow survive late. So maybe had they been playing Georgia Tech,
whatever. I don't even know about North Dakota State this year, but I can guarantee you that they can absolutely drain threes, right?
They were winless coming in.
But was he wrong?
Okay, that's not good. Yeah, but right. Do they light it up? Talking about being on brand. That is just lights out shooting.
Yeah. So Will Chambers joining us. Jeremy Mandel, of course, always with us, at Jeremy Mandel on Twitter. Will Chambers is weirdly at _Will Chambers.
I can't get my name, man. I can't. The dude doesn't even tweet.
At Will Chambers, no tweets.
No tweets. Can't get a hold of him. Nothing. Whole career. Can't. In fact, I couldn't even get _Will Chambers for a long time. It magically, because I'll try every now and again because I just wanted my name instead of bouncing around every place I was and Will Chambers this or Will that. Finally, I was _Will Chambers. I was like, it's there, got it. Some real world problems right there, guys.
I was very confused when I saw your Twitter handle. I was like, why is it _Will Chambers? That's odd, but now that makes a lot more sense.
Just trying to stand out, Ari.
So if Will Chambers is listening to this, please, we beg you,
come on, man.
We can put together a plan or something. He just wants money.
Yeah, I actually offer money.
Really?
Nothing?
Yeah, in a DM. Yeah, I said, I was like, dude, I was like, hey, man, I just, I understand, if you want to hold on to it, you want to keep it, I totally get it. But, I'd like it. I do have is somewhat of a public profile. Not trying to, be like,
right.
But whatever. It would be great. Nothing.
You didn't even get a response?
No.
No, because this person doesn't. This Will Chambers made a Twitter account and has never checked it since.
Never. Yeah, but you know what? Don't they cut him off at some point? Like if you don't do anything for a while.
Yeah.
Except for this.
He hasn't. I might have to.
Well, he may actually use it. He just doesn't check this stuff.
Yeah. Or he uses it, or it's like a burner.
I know lots of people that have a Twitter profile and don't tweet. They just read it.
That's true.
100%. And he's not an egg.
Oh.
Yeah.
And he didn't even respond to your DM.
He's a reader. I bet he's a reader.
Avid readers, the worst.
I wonder if he knows they have messages.
I was willing to offer $3 million. Still has no clue.
It's worth that. It's worth at least that.
Come on.
Okay, so the reason we got Will on the show today, aside from his dashing good looks, is because Will is from Kentucky, which, as I've been told, is a state that makes whiskey.
Yeah, some, yes.
So I
figured you're from Kentucky, you must know a thing or two about whiskey.
Hey, it's that basketball and horse racing is, those are the things that make our blood, pump faster, for sure.
Or shorter?
So there's no...
For sure. I'm sorry. This may be my first bourbon. It ain't my first drink of the night, buddy.
What are you drinking?
Buffalo Trace. Which, honestly, when Buffalo Trace first came to the market, I was never a fan of it. And about 2 years ago, I went on a date, and it happened to be just they didn't have Weller, which was great. Like, all right, this. Here in Dallas, it's so great about how you go and you're like, get Weller, and it's the well, and you're like,
yeah, right.
This is the most unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. When I saw it at some bars, restaurant, and I'm like, I was like, what's your well bourbon? Because I don't know what they know, and I don't know if it's going to be Old Crow or KT or whatever. But I'm curious. And then so a bunch of people are like, oh yeah, it's it was the green label. I'm like, yeah, I'll take that on the rocks. They're like, you want a well bourbon on the rocks? I'm like,
yeah. You better believe it.
Nobody else in here knows that's the best on the rocks you're gonna get. But anyway, so
if Ari didn't say that you were from Kentucky, I would have been able to figure it out because nobody who wasn't born in Kentucky calls it KT.
Oh, yeah, Kentucky's finest tavern.
That's right.
That's right.
What's the T?
But yeah, that's what you're used to seeing, right? For the most part, I'm sure you can get some bullshit other stuff all over, but whatever. And I got a chance. I tasted it, and it had been, a few years, which is always a good idea to kind of go back and I feel taste every few years, even if it's something that you don't like, because that's definitely going to be a new batch. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they're the ones that, if we're talking about just the normal ones you find out there that are, produced in mass, they are what they are. And that's why, if we're connoisseurs to an extent, are really just bourbon lovers. We always love the single barrels and the small batches and stuff like that. But, there's some really good ones out there. And I had Buffalo Trace. I had just gotten it neat, and I tasted it, and it was like, oh my God. I always felt like there was this dry, arid flavor with Buffalo Trace. And then I had this glass, and it had so much malt and some caramel with a little fruit in there, and I was like, damn. I'm like, it seemed just much more complex, and I was like, ever since then I've been buying bottles of Buffalo Trace. And of course the great thing about it too is that I got a liter over there for $40.
Oh yeah, it's great.
It's amazing.
It's the greatest thing about bourbon.
Yeah.
Yep.
You can spend hundreds of dollars, but you don't need to get good bourbon.
Yeah.
We were talking about before the show, you can go on the secondary market and spend thousands of dollars for a Van Winkle, and look, it's great bourbon, but you spend $40 on Buffalo Trace, and it's not like world's worse.
It's not even that. It's the fact that people have to understand. I feel like when you're drinking bourbon, to understand that the world of bourbon lives in that $40 to $60 range.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like Scotch, and for good reason, because Scotch needs to be aged over such a longer period of time.
Right.
And if you need to age it over a longer period of time, you can't sell it as often. So it needs to be more expensive. But Scotland, the weather in Scotland is what it is. You don't have those changes in temperature that you do have in Kentucky and some other places that they make bourbon, which is, essential to how to get it, to where it's good to go after 4 years. And so with that, it's not incredibly expensive to make. And I think a tremendous amount of credit should go to the bourbon community, because despite the fact that we have had a bourbon boom and how sought after these products are, that, the price increases have not significantly jumped. And they really haven't. Weller, look, you can get Weller. When I first moved down here to Texas, the first night I got here, I get over to my sister and my brother-in-law's place, and my brother-in-law Joe is like, I got to get you over to Total Wine, which are all over the place now. They weren't in Kentucky and they weren't in a number of places, but they were starting to really grow. But the bottom line is, you want to take me there because I'm a big wine guy too, and they had a well over an insane amount. I want to say like 8,000 labels. And the place that I was used to was the biggest purveyor in Kentucky at the time was the Party Source. Now, they've had Liquor Barn take over, but the Party Source is in Newport, Kentucky, right across the river from Cincinnati. And they had like 2,000 labels of wine, not to mention all the liquor that they have. And so he takes me in there and we're going through all the wine. I'm like, damn, man, this is unbelievable. I was like, let's go over to the bourbon section. We walk over to the bourbon section, and they are stocked full of Weller. Just the regular special reserve. It was flushed of the 175s. And they are, I said liter before of, I didn't mean that with the Buffalo Trace I got. It's actually, it's a 175 I got for $40. But at that time, for the Weller, I was getting it for $30 for a 175. Which is crazy. That would never stay on the shelves in Kentucky, ever. And so, we were buying it, and then, the word started to get out a little bit more, and the boom, was happening. But it was just amazing to see how you could go in there and, they would have, all these, things in there. And the fact that Weller and a lot of these are not that well known. Well, Weller is what eventually becomes Pappy Van Winkle. And, it's a little bit different now than it was, obviously, late 60s, so 50 years ago. But it still is what everybody is getting now today, which is a very, very good bourbon. And retail, honestly, is only, and I'm guessing right now, or not guessing, I think it's $200 to $300 a bottle. But it's the secondary market where it's thousands of dollars a bottle, because it's just, I think it's the mystique around it. But that's the most expensive that you can get. And it's only because that's only really basically out of necessity. Weller, you're getting still now like a 175 for, I think, tops $35, which is crazy.
Yeah. The funny
and that's
thing
how
is,
good it is.
In Texas, we're not that far removed from being able to just basically get not just Weller Special Reserve, but the 12-year and the antique, basically whenever we want it. It's only been the last couple of years where that's even hard.
Totally. A huge misconception is, and I get hit up on this all the time about how, if you live in Kentucky, that you could find it everywhere. No, it's worse, because everybody in Kentucky knows,
right,
and loves it and drinks it, so they buy it. So it's very hard. It's actually much easier to get it in places like here in Texas and other places, despite the fact that they feel like that's not the case. But
Right.
but yeah, it totally is.
There's just not as much. It's just not as well known in the brands, and you're right. I mean, certainly, I would imagine in Kentucky it's like that. We were talking before the show about the book Pappy Land, which is written by Wright Thompson, who is a fantastic writer. He's from Kentucky. Is he Kentucky?
He's from Mississippi. Which, if you've ever been to Mississippi, is when I first came down here to Dallas, I got a job that had me traveling to Mississippi once a month. I was like, this does remind me of Kentucky, except just south. Not quite the rolling hills, and definitely not the horse farms, but it reminded me of it. I'm like, yeah, I was like, this is, there's south and south, right? Like, we're in the south here in Texas. It looks very different than it does in, Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, like that. There's like that corridor in the southeast where it's like, that's where it's like SEC country. It's not just about football. I mean, it's literally livelihood.
Yeah.
There are a lot of similarities between everybody there and people that live in those states, for sure.
Yeah. So give me your thoughts on Pappy Land. I haven't read it. I know you haven't finished it, but what is it about, basically?
Well, I mean, it's about the Van Winkle family, which is this is the thing, like, Ari, I know that you know Wright Thompson really well. He's an ESPN senior writer, and he's not one of those, he's a feature writer.
Right.
And he is one that I will read everything he puts out. And I will say this, I highly, highly recommend, and I don't even know if you could do this, but I'm assuming you probably could. Just go to YouTube and type in like Wright Thompson or something like that, because I'm sure you can find him on camera, because he's been on camera on SportsCenter, like, talking. But to hear his voice and to kind of see him before you read him, because it's like perfect. He has this like he's a bigger guy, had a beard. He usually has a beard, and has this like deep kind of voice. It's great to read his book when you can hear his voice in it. Is basically what I'm trying to say. So yes. I would say that first, but it's a good understanding of, like I said, of that what it's like together. Mississippi and Kentucky may be very different, but very similar because of that whole area. And it's just a look inside the family of the Van Winkle family and how, Pappy came to be, because there's so much mystique behind it. And very little of it is understood, because how many of us really read into anything, Mm-hmm. Like, oh yeah, it's this. I heard it's this. I heard it's that. Well, did you really check it out or know about it? Or are you just saying or understanding it from a secondary source or something like that? And it's great because I went to college with Preston, who is Julian's son and Pappy's grandson. And Preston's one of the most amazing guys you'll ever meet. Couldn't be a nicer guy in the world. And I just, I know him from college. And that doesn't mean that I get Pappy. Or I've even tasted a ton of Pappy. I tasted Pappy maybe 24 times. And Preston is honestly, like, we were like in the same group in college. It's crazy.
You never brought it up. But hey, so can I have a bottle or two?
What's that?
You just never brought it up?
I didn't hear you.
You just never brought it up? Like,
just brought what up?
Like, can I have some? Can I have bottles? Do you have bottles? Can I have bottles? Do you have any bottles?
Well, first off, keep in mind that, so put this in perspective. I'm 41. When we're in college, this is the late 90s into the early 2000s. Pappy Van Winkle now is a huge deal, and we had a bourbon boom. To be honest, like, so we've all liked bourbon, but like we be at places and people start talking about bourbon, and like Preston, if somebody even asked him a little question or got in there, Preston would just go into the whole thing, whatever, and be like, here we go again, like Preston would do it. But and now it has become like this just huge sensation, whereas I never asked for anything. Well, I mean, I think maybe I have. Like, the last job I had before I came down here, I was a general manager and wine director of a place, and I don't know how the allotments go, but it's literally so difficult. And Preston was friends with everybody. Like, you got to imagine how many people probably hit him up for bottles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But no, I don't. I've never hit him up for a bottle.
when y'all were in school together, it was not remotely what it is now. I mean, they were having a hard time.
Right.
It was like, what are you talking about? $100 for a bottle of bourbon? That's ridiculous. It would just sit.
Totally. I mean, honestly, like those bottles of the 20 and the 23 were going for $100 and $150 a bottle. It wasn't until recently that I heard that they're going for higher now, the 200 to 300. Yeah. So, but obviously on the secondary market is when they go for much higher because you have to win a lottery, in order to get it. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes from, and that's really what bourbon is all about, right? I mean, it's the history of our country. It's the only Native American spirit. So it's the one that we can call our own, which is the only one that we can, where everything else. I mean, whiskey's one thing, but bourbon is different. And there's reasons behind that because of the corn, and that's a whole other story. But so it is our true nation's spirit. You also get along with the fact that, of where it comes from. And no matter where you're from in the world, family is important and it's all a big part of it. But when you are in mountains and in hollers and areas, it's those are really close-knit communities that are very close together. And so, that heritage of it and where it came from, it becomes very, close to the heart of everything that, all of us in Kentucky are about, but that's not exclusive to Kentucky. So there's history in it. When we talk about the whiskey tax, with the beginnings of our country, with Hamilton and Washington and all of that. And then if you know the history behind bourbon and understand that, it was used as currency in a lot of different ways because it was considered, the best of the best. That Blanton's, which is a very prestigious bourbon, is named after Colonel Blanton's, which if anywhere that you go in a warehouse that have barrels, they may deny it to you, but there's no question there's barrels that do well than any other barrels. And I'm talking about in any kind of spirit, and bourbon in particular. And what they called these special areas that they knew they could get what they called honey barrels, which were the best ones. Well, those were at, I believe, Buffalo Trace, where it is, just Frankfurt. I'm pretty sure it's that one. But the honey barrels, the ones that they knew they were getting the best juice out of, that's what they took and made into Blanton's. And it was Colonel Blanton's, using that for political favors. They would be giving that away. So, bourbon, when you drink it and you have it, that it has that sense of history around it. And the great part of it is that they haven't really, jacked up the price on it no matter what, because everything else in any other society or part of society has been. And it's pretty amazing that they just have refused to do so. And I'm pretty proud of it.
Yeah, there's a great book called Bourbon Justice that basically goes through and talks about like how you can essentially tell the history of the country just from going through the history of bourbon and
totally
the ebbs and flows of the regulation of it, the Bottled and Bond Act, all the like the. I think it's the only spirit where there's a legal definition of what it can be.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, because
I know bourbon does. I don't think anything else does.
It has to be right. And this is one of the misconceptions too about it. Like, obviously you can get stuff that's called bourbon that's outside of Kentucky. So everybody always wants to ask me like, well, it's not bourbon if it's not from Kentucky. And I'm like, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
I go, it's not bourbon if it's not made in America. Right. It has to be made in America. I go, it was made in Kentucky kind of first, but, there's also a part of it, coming in from Pennsylvania and all that. And the Kentucky climate makes it really, really perfect for the whole aging process of bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
But, anyway, I believe that the best bourbons are made in Kentucky, but you would never get me to believe that you couldn't make a great bourbon outside of Kentucky. That's garbage. But yeah, it's the charred white oak, right? It's the it has to be American. Under the it has to be more than 50% corn, and then the under 160 proof out of the still.
I think is it 160? I thought it was 145. Either way, but
yeah, it's one of those. I think it's got to be higher than that because I've had 140 bourbon, and if you came out of the still at 140 and spent any time in wood, that'd be hard to keep it at at 140. But yeah, those are the pillars.
Yeah. Technically, you could go throw some barrels in Hawaii and it's still bourbon. It's going to taste way different, but it's still bourbon.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the thing about anywhere that you have it or anywhere that you make it, right? Like in Texas, the thing that enables, I think, bourbon. I say I think the experts. It's the fact that you have such hot, humid summers where the liquid expands into the wood, but then also you have really cold winters, and so it comes out of it. So you have that, and it's over 4 years. So you have that expansion, and then the regression, and it goes back and forth, which is the reason why it takes really 4 years in order to get to age a good bourbon in a barrel. Whereas, like we were talking before, in Scotland, I mean, how much does the temperature change in Scotland?
You
they're
gotta
wood
go,
for
you got to go like 20 years to really get something there.
Yeah, I mean, it's moving around, or depending on all kinds of different stuff in there. But it needs time to age in the wood, and it just takes more time because you don't have that difference between those seasons where you have the heat and the cold, where you do really perfectly in Kentucky.
Right. So, Ari, can I ask? I've got a couple of sports journalists here. Can I ask a quick sports question?
No.
Okay, I'll skip it then. Never mind.
Kidding. Go ahead.
So James Harden doesn't show up to anything in Houston that he's supposed to show up to. Is this just what it is now? The players just decide if they want to honor contracts?
Yes. It's been like this. This isn't just what it is now. It's been like this for years. Players have total control. It's the illusion of control that organizations have. It's the only sport where it's like that. And, yeah, he's going to force a trade.
So that's just it. Like, Luka Doncic could decide next year he doesn't want to play in Dallas anymore and just don't show up, and then it'll magically happen for him?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's really great for those guys. I'm happy.
In basketball and in the NBA. Now, I'll say this, that I agree 100% with what Ari just said, and that is without any question how it's like. The situation down there in Houston and with Harden, there is a part of the players that do want to have a good relationship and a good working relationship, which they really do. Because, remember, the commissioner is part of really owners.
Right.
They're the ones that decide that, and that's in every organization, or every sports organization. But the one that works the best is definitely done in the NBA, and they like that. And it really does work well together. And it's also true, and part of the reasons why the players like it so much is because they have more power than certainly the players in the NFL. And very online what they do in Major League Baseball. But I do think that they value that relationship and not trying to go to too many extremes. But there are, in this day and age and time, all that stuff on why players do what they do. And there's lines that get crossed. And I think for Harden, I think for Westbrook, lines were crossed, and they're like, it's time to go.
But yeah, I mean, it's been moving towards players' power for some time now.
And don't get me wrong, I don't begrudge them wanting to be traded. From what I understand, it's Tillman Fertitta is not the greatest guy to work for, but they're hardly alone in doing this. I feel like ever since the Kawhi Leonard deal in San Antonio is when I started to really pay attention to it. But ever since that Kawhi Leonard deal, it seems like every year there's somebody else who just doesn't want to be there, so they don't show up anymore. Anthony Davis did it in New Orleans, and I don't mind asking for a trade, but at least show up to pretend.
This happens in the NFL too. They don't have as much power, but NFL players do that too. They hold out from training camp, try to force trades, try to get a long-term deal. It's their leverage is their body, which is their how they make money. Obviously, I don't know.
Ari, I look at it to where I think that the NBA has definitely come over the last few years as a better understanding as to what it takes to win in this day and age in the NBA. It's different, obviously, but it's always different with athletes because bigger, stronger, faster, and the game changes and all that. But as far as mentality and as far as how they feel about their own brand and what they need to do, and I think it's been a little bit more drastic over the last 3 years, like just looking at Kawhi in general, right? So Kawhi went through the whole situation with San Antonio, right? Where he didn't feel comfortable with how he was being treated in San Antonio. Remember all that, like with the injury, and they're like, okay, can you go or can you not go? And he's like, I can't go. That was a big controversy at the time. And they had to let go of that whole thing with him. And so he goes to Toronto, and you're like, well, you're only getting him on a lease. And it worked out really well because they obviously won a championship. But he went through, having the, whatever they're called. It's slipping my mind, the work, whatever. He's taking games off. But he was the only superstar that they really had there. And now he goes to the Clippers, and he's doing the same stuff. And I feel like in that 3 years that things have changed a little bit more in understanding that, okay, we still need people with the mentality that go back a little bit more to the Isaiah Thomas, Michael Jordan types of like, we need to win, and I'm not taking this shit. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big reason why the Clippers fell short last year. Because I'll tell you what, LeBron ain't like that. I may have these arguments about LeBron versus Michael and all this stuff. And LeBron did do times where he was, taking a few games off to save his legs. But all of a sudden, he's just like, nope, I'm not doing that. We're winning every game because we need to have a competitive landscape here in order to win. And I think what we saw is the Clippers last year did not have that. And when they were pushed, they buckled they folded like a lawn chair.
Yeah, there was a great article in The Athletic, which kind of outlining the whole everything that happened with the Clippers, which as somebody who lives in San Antonio and hates Kawhi Leonard, that article was like almost a sexual experience for me. But but speaking of you mentioned Isaiah Thomas, and Ari and I talk about this all the time. In Bill Simmons' book of basketball, he talks about how Isaiah Thomas told him the secret of basketball, and the secret of basketball is it's not about basketball. And you get these guys, the Kawhis, the James Harden, that Kyrie Irving, I think, is another one, who make it all about them and all about their whatever they want, and is everything perfect for me right this minute? And if not, what can I do about it? It flies completely in the face of that. I don't think you can be a consistent winner that way at all.
The thing
Ari, do you want to?
No, I mean, the thing I'll say about Kawhi is this is an interesting discussion considering Kawhi did leave and go win a championship in Toronto. But it was as if he had to prove, he was out to prove himself because of how the situation in San Antonio, went. And it was like that was his FU to everybody in that moment. But I'm trying to figure out like what exactly you guys are saying in terms of like you need like an FU attitude, you need guys that aren't coddled or constantly trying to leave and then, they acquiesce. Like, I'm just trying to characterize what exactly you guys are talking about in terms of what's wrong with the NBA today, if that is what you're saying.
Well, I think what Will said with LeBron there, that's the difference. You've got LeBron who doesn't, just from a superstar standpoint, LeBron doesn't tolerate not being great as often and frequently as he possibly can.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if his knee hurts that day, he's going to get out there and he's going to kick ass. As opposed to 9 out of 10 most other superstars in that league right now who just don't feel that way.
Yeah.
Well, I think that another thing that LeBron has learned is something that he took away from Michael Jordan, which was that, like, you can be out there every night. You don't have to go out there and do what James Harden and Russell Westbrook do. And here's what I mean by that. Like, I personally, and I have at times, I've banked hard on Russell and on James Harden for the style and the way that they play and how I feel like that's not the way that you can build a team in order to win a championship. But make no mistake about it. Those guys give every inch of their soul, and they do it every single night. They cannot go in the playoffs because I don't know if it's human. You can't do what they do. Michael, when he was at his height with the Bulls or throughout his career, was in there to win every single game, every single night. But he also knew that he needed his teammates in there to do that. And they needed to shoulder some of it and maneuver it around and do all that kind of stuff. Harden and Westbrook feel like that they need to do everything every night. And God love them. God bless them. That's where they are with it. And so I don't want to hammer them too hard on that point. But that ain't Kawhi. And I think that you can find that medium. And I think that LeBron has found that medium. Now, look, if we want to get into a debate and talk about how I feel about LeBron as being like the overall greatest and stuff like that, especially in winning time, we can have that. And that's different than how I feel about anything else. But I think that what LeBron does is a great understanding as to when he needs to turn it on and when he can hold it back a little bit. Because even Michael did that. Michael was the most competitive person that maybe we have had on God's green earth ever. But as much he would only step in and get to a Russell Westbrook, James Harden type spot if he felt like he absolutely had to when he matured in the league. They still do that, So I think that's the difference right there, that you have to look at these players and get them to have an understanding, because this is a very individualistic sport as far as, how you can be successful in it. And thus, to be at an ultimate success as far as a team, you need to be a team. LeBron has that. Steph Curry has that. Kevin Durant has that. The other guys don't.
Yeah, well said. And even Kawhi, when he won with Toronto, I mean, it was very much an anomaly in terms of like, I'm just going to do it all myself.
Yeah. And he's that good that, he could do it.
In that moment, and he was going up against a team that he could beat that way, but normally that's just 9 times out of 10, that's not how it's going to work. And you're right, you do need to rely on the other complementary pieces. And if you haven't done that all year, you can't suddenly do that in the playoffs and expect that they're going to be ready for you.
You got to trust them, right? I mean, that was the whole thing with Michael, right? Like, about trusting Paxson and Kerr and Grant. Right. And then Pippen had to earn it early on too. But, once Pippen did, that gave Michael more confidence to, go after more guys, to get them more, to dig into them to make sure that they were ready.
All right, I want to close with this, which is both a sports and a food topic. But this is more of an etiquette question. Etiquette, which is not like etiquette.
He likes it phonetically done.
Yes.
This is a question: is it socially acceptable to be eating sushi off of another human being?
Yes.
Yes?
Sure. Isn't that like a thing in Japan?
I think it's a thing everywhere.
Yeah, that's getting a thumbs up for me.
Are you volunteering?
No, not off of me. Nobody wants to eat anything off of me.
So
I'll eat some sushi off of some selected people.
Yeah. So UNLV quarterback Max Gillum apologized because he was apparently featured on a Bravo show that taped back in the spring but just came out called Below Deck. And on this episode, he's seen eating sushi off of a lovely young lady.
Mm.
And so he's had to come out and apologize for that, basically.
Yeah, the same thing happened to the San Antonio fire chief.
Yes.
About 2 or 3 months ago. There was a picture of him. There was some Japanese party, and there was sushi being served on this girl, and I guess he was culturally appropriating or being sexist or both or whatever. But he had to go and apologize for that.
Oh, wait a minute. So, okay, I think we're talking about a few different things here. How I picture it is me with the other person doing that. So we're talking about a party here, where it's like people are.
Yeah, it's like this whole like in a high-end Japanese party, they will have women with sushi on them as if their body is a platter, and they just lay there on the table, and people come serve themselves off this woman with sushi on them.
To be fair, that person is not being held against their will, correct?
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
One
like,
would assume.
I mean, what kind of shit is it? Like, yeah, we have like strip clubs are still open in America, right?
Are they?
I think they're drive-through now.
Well, that's a good question.
Will, have you been to a strip club lately?
I actually haven't.
I was just wondering why.
I would honestly tell you, even if I hadn't, but I didn't even think of it in the COVID aspect of it. But maybe they're not open right now. Either way, as far as looking at it from that aspect, all right, if we're talking about it from a pandemic standpoint, I would say like, okay, that's probably a no. But if we're doing it from like a whole other thing, I'd be like, look, that's up to the individual and all that. And then if people are being held against their will, otherwise,
Yeah, that seems different.
yeah. Otherwise, police your own life.
So he's having to apologize for this. I want to read his statement, if I could. I've just got to find it first.
Fire chief, that's a little different. You know, I mean, you can't be doing that. Like, if you're in public life as like a public servant, that's not a good look.
It's not.
I mean, how dumb are you?
I mean, he's not running. It's not an elected position.
Yeah, but he is. People are supposed to take him seriously.
When I've lived in San Antonio,
I see Jerry.
I had no idea. I have never in my life been aware of who the San Antonio fire chief was until he had sushi off a naked woman.
You know what? That's a great point. I want to completely retract what I said before. If you're a fire chief or like police chief or something, maybe not the police
Go
chief,
eat
but
as
a
much
fire
sushi
chief.
as you
I mean, a
want.
fire chief, like you're literally, that's all you're doing are going into buildings on fire. I am 100% for those people going in there and having sushi off of naked.
Yeah,
women's
you eat
bodies.
sushi however you want to eat your sushi.
Yeah. If you're the mayor or a councilman or, a representative,
Well, I feel like if you're doing something,
not the best move.
if you're doing something that requires that people vote for you, then maybe don't get your photo taken with the naked sushi lady.
That's probably that is good advice. You should be, Jeremy, looking at a communications director job in politics.
Yeah, it's really brilliant the way I communicate these sorts of things.
I think that you
It's kind of what his
got a
wife
keen
does.
mind.
I got a future here, you know.
That
If
is-
you want,
it's actually
scope up
entirely what his
naked
wife
people,
does.
Yeah.
So Max Gilliam, or Gilliam, one of the two. I'd like to apologize for my poor judgment while on the TV show Below Deck and acknowledge that I have made a mistake that I will learn from. While it was not my idea, nor any of my friends' ideas to eat sushi off of a model, I should have exercised better judgment and declined the idea immediately when it was brought up to the producers. This is not
So Ari,
which no guy would ever
I've
say.
seen clips. I've seen clips of it. Right. Like, don't be such an asshole. Really? Like, we all know, like, nobody's saying no to that shit.
Nobody.
But, like, I've seen not episodes, I've seen clips. I think I saw one episode. Like, I know what it is. And I'm pretty sure the whole story behind the show, is it not being like, these are people that are, like, service, in the service industry on, like, yachts. But, like, Below Deck is, like, how they live, like, their own reality life. outside of working on those yachts.
Am
I right here? Do you know?
I have no idea, but that sounds good. That sounds like, yeah. The reality series profiles a group of young people who work aboard yachts that measure well over 100 feet long. Crew members known as yachties live aboard the luxurious privately owned vessels, making sure that their demanding clients' ever-changing needs are met.
These are service industry people, okay? If anybody is condemning them for doing that, go fuck yourself. For real. Okay?
Will Chambers on Twitter at _Will Chambers. Jeremy Mandel on Twitter at Jeremy Mandel. I am Ari Temkin on Twitter at Ari Sports. Make sure to hit subscribe if you have not yet already, and give us a rating, especially if you're in the service industry, because as Will said,
those ratings count double.
That's right. And
absolutely. And fuck Yelp.
But
I'm not even trying to pander to them. I'm just really honestly giving my opinion here on especially Yelp and the service industry. I was in there for a long time.
So why Yelp? Just don't like how people Yelp?
Because who the fuck made you Anthony Bourdain? You know shit about shit. They don't people go in. It's a way for people to be like, if they we all have been wronged in certain ways, but some of us actually have self-awareness and understand when maybe what people are saying to me, I was in the wrong here. Some people don't.
Right.
And anytime that you open it up for anybody to just go in there and be like, screw you guys, this business is terrible, and have that be the first thing that people read in a business, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
First off,
I just like the idea of and I don't have more going on in my life than the average person, but to have so little going on in your life that, I'm not satisfied with the frequency with which I got my Coke refilled. I'm going to go on this website and slander everything about this business. It's ridiculous.
Totally. And Jeremy, yeah, right. But that all of that stuff, those are we're looking at the petty people. Or maybe people will watch this and be like, you guys are being petty, or you've got an axe to grind and all that. Well, here's a little look behind the curtain. They will literally come to you right after you open as a restaurant or a business in this industry and be like, well, we can help you, regulate the types of reviews are seen on there.
Right.
And I was like, oh, how so? Well, when you become a member, and by the way, you have to pay for this, then that's when you partner with them. That's what they say. You partner with them, and then, you can help regulate exactly how all of those, those reviews go.
But if
I'm sitting in this meeting, and I'm like, I just want to make sure I'm getting this right. So, some asshole had just come in, while we opened up immediately, I ran a place. And, we had people coming in that were, this is one where the craft cocktail, this is back in 2014. And craft cocktails had just become a big thing really all over the place. Definitely more so a longer time ago in New York and everywhere else in bigger cities like here in Dallas, but in Cincinnati, not so much. And people were coming in and, they would go online and make all these complaints or whatever. We had just opened. And so all of a sudden these reviews are coming in and they're slamming this and that and some of the food are any restaurant, when you open up, you go through your hiccups, you go through your stumbling stuff. It happens all the time. But when people make reviews on that and you're like, that sucks. You would hope that people would have a little bit more humanity on that. But if you're terrible and you suck and all that kind of stuff, it is what it is. But we did not suck. We were really good at what we did. And we had some of those, and, we're all a little pissed about it, but it is what it is. And then the Yelp people come to you, and they're like, well, if you partner with us, we can help you, do that. I'm like, so I have to pay for it in order to make sure that the assholes that just write stuff, they could not like my server because she broke up with him, 2 months ago. That's going to be up there. But if I pay for this, I can have that kicked out. That's what I call a racket.
Thank you, Will. You're the best, buddy.
Yelp. I hate Yelp. I love you, though.
I love you
and
too,
Jeremy,
buddy.
I think you're terrific.
Likewise, Will.
All right, Jeremy, for this episode, leave the people with something.
Go delete your Yelp profile, but give us a rating.